Chapter 24. A Stranger's Body. At last, Blackstone felt forgiven. The Evil blew in warm rains and revived the fortunes of the farmers. Alfena's bounty created generous food stocks that would last through the next year, even if the grim wind were to blow again. Leusios ordered great grain stores to be built in Blackstone and sent messages to every homestead across the far-flung Keetish wilderness. All who gave to the Blackstone stores would be able to claim their share back in leaner times. Thus, the first bonds between Blackstone and the rest of the Keetish people were forged. Jorwin Weaver, the Keetish Cycle. Elayna had been tempted to deny the signs at first, but no. Anya was a good friend, and Elayna had learned enough from her as Blackstone's midwife to admit the truth. She was pregnant, and there was no doubt as to the father. Winter closed in, and Blackstone celebrated a very merry tool fest before she visited him in his new home to share the news. Leusios took it well, although he had to take a moment to sit down. "I was worried," he admitted with an embarrassed laugh. "I thought you were avoiding me. Murgathwin put the fear of Morga into me when I mentioned going up to visit you at the farm." Elayna set herself down in a chair. "I'm sorry, Leusios. Yes, I wasn't sure what to tell you. I needed time, but that doesn't change things for now," she warned him gently. In truth, it had thrown all her thinking into disarray, but that was a private dilemma for her and her alone. "Whatever you need, it's yours," he promised. "Maybe you can stay here to be closer to Anya, and I can hire hands to help on the farm." Her first instinct was to shrug off the offer, but then she paused to consider it. Beautifully plastered and painted walls surrounded her. She sat on fabrics with a warm tiled floor beneath her feet and oak beams above her head. This was luxury. "I can work the farm for now," she insisted. "But maybe later, in 3 or 4 months' time." "It'll be new experience for both of us," Leusios admitted tentatively. Leanne, Leusios's housekeeper, came in with a tray bearing 2 steaming beakers of mulled ale. Elayna gave Leusios a severe look, and the two waited awkwardly while Leanne chatted away. "Delighted to be seeing you, Mistress Elayna. Thought you both might be wanting some warm against your winter chill." She departed with ill-concealed curiosity and excitement about their conversation. Leusios waited for Leanne to close the door. "We may not be married, but I still want to help," he insisted. Elayna breathed in the spice from her ale and closed her eyes to enjoy the moment. She could get used to living like this. The night she had spent with him may have been careless, but she didn't regret it. "Thank you. I appreciate that, Leusios." She smiled apologetically. "I just haven't worked out what this means between us." She sipped the warm ale and put it down on a table scattered with sheafs of parchment covered with tallies. Leusios was so untidy. "What's this?" she asked, picking up one. "Tax takes from the mines. Blackstone has never been wealthier," Leusios announced with relish. Elayna scanned down the numbers. "That new mine of Gavain's close to the Blackstone. It doesn't make financial sense." Leusios shrugged. "He can afford the loss here and there." No, that's not the problem. It's earning him too much money." She could not explain it, but the numbers didn't look right. "He could only make that kind of profit if he wasn't paying his miners."
"Ha! Keats excel at complaining." Leusios laughed her concerns away. "So I'd know if anyone was not being paid."
She grinned and put the papers aside. "Now that is true enough." They talked, and the conversation wandered between the practical and the trivial. Throughout, Elayna weighed Leusios's suitability as a father for their child. Right now, she just didn't know. Evil blew in bountiful rains, and by the early weeks of summer, the Keetish fields were full of swelling heads of wheat. However, By then, Elayna had had enough of the pregnancy and accepted Leusios's offer to move into his house. He had ordered a new bed especially for her. It was durian with a linen mattress stuffed with wool. She had her first good sleep for months. After a week, Leusios suggested they take flowers to put on the graves of Hal and Lucius's mother, Belwyn. They talked as they walked down the path to the cemetery. She was conscious of her awkward waddle and made a joke of it. It was in that moment the flowers for her father's grave fell from her hand in shock. "Look!" Chuckling from her joke, Leusios took a moment to register her horror.
"What is it?"
"There, in the water amongst the reeds." She hurried gracelessly off the path, her pregnant belly making her balance unwieldy. They stopped and stared. There was a dead man in the water. He was face down and barely visible. His dull brown traveling cloak covered him in a sodden mass. He was lodged amongst the reeds, which had stopped him from drifting downstream to the ford. Elayna glanced across the river. On the opposite bank was a short track between Blackstone and the two fortified Durian compounds. The scattered bushes and trees were all that remained of Cledger wood consumed by Blackstone's hunger for timber. Leusios went into the river up to his waist, and Elayna knelt down and grabbed the dead man's shoulders. Together they hauled the body onto the bank.
"Wait," said Leusios as he climbed out of the river. "Together."
He twisted the hips as Elayna turned the shoulders, and they rolled the man onto his back. The pale face was puffed and wrinkled from the water. Elayna had never seen such pallid blue lips before. She shuddered. "How long has he been in the water?"
"A day, maybe 2. Not many people pass this way."
Leusios looked up towards the monastery and cemetery, and then back to Blackstone.
"I would have walked right past him if you hadn't seen him."
Elayna had stopped listening. Her fingers were drawn to the dark stain on the man's sandy-colored tunic around the stomach. Her fingertips picked out 3 holes in the man's tunic. 3 thrusts, she gasped.
"Let me see."
Leusios leaned forward. "It's him," she hissed. She didn't care that a hysterical edge entered her voice. "The man who killed father has killed again." Blood demanded blood, and her father's ghost demanded vengeance. She demanded answers, and to her surprise, she felt a sharp pain in her fingers resting on the corpse. She felt a spark of connection with the dead man, and his memories flowed. A picture crystallized in her mind with bold splashes of color and light. His guide talks and laughs with him. Another man in Cassonii black hails them. They gripped hands. The newcomer is speaking and gestures towards the river. They walk amongst the bushes and trees, talking in secret, a distraction. The guide draws a dagger. The traveler sees the blade. He's fast and starts to react, but the man in black grabs him from behind, his left arm wrapping around his throat. It slows him enough for the killer to stab him once, twice, 3 times. His life gutters like a candle caught in a sudden gale. He sees the smile twitch on the lips of his murderer, the sadistic pleasure found in destroying a life. He hits the water and bleeds out faster than he can drown. She jerked back with a cry. The baby kicked. Leusios caught her confused.
"What's wrong?"
"Nothing," she lied. She couldn't stop shaking. Fatigue and nausea made her lean heavily into his arms. "Take me back." Elayna's changes of mood had kept Leusios off balance even before they found the body. Impending fatherhood had left him confused, especially when he realized that it did not guarantee him Elayna's affections. Finding a body had been a shock for both of them, but now some troubling thought distracted her, but she refused to explain it. Instead, she sent him to tell Vibnia. "Show me the body," the priest said the moment he had explained. She gestured for him to lead the way. "To dispose of him in the Ruthiol was an act of arrogance or urgency," she surmised as they hurried across the fjord. They found the body where he and Elayna had left it. The priest took one glance and said, "His name is Sallow." "The saboteurs sent Picasonius." Leusios suppressed any reaction.
Who was he asked a little too flatly.
No idea, Vibnia said as she knelt to study the body. He came by to give thanks for a safe journey yesterday. Her pause and raised eyebrows showed that the irony was not lost on the priest. Ledlos walked him over to the church from his yard. Vibnia paused again, thoughtfully. I was discussing a blessing with Taneos. The priest leaned closer to inspect the corpse. He's seen a great deal of labor and violence.
A soldier, then?
The priest shrugged. Possibly. See the bruises on the throat? He was grabbed from behind, around his neck.
So, 2 attackers?
Vibnia nodded. With clinical professionalism, she pressed a finger into each wound to measure their angle. Leusios felt his stomach heave. 3 strikes by habit. 1 pierced the man's heart. He died quickly. The assassin took no chances. He wanted an instant kill, she concluded. Either because they were out in the open and too exposed to potential witnesses, or this Sallow was too dangerous. The victim said he would be taking a room in the old Fire Inn, but never arrived. He must have been killed soon after I saw him.
What's this?
Leusios sensed rather than saw the sparkle of power. He reached under the dead man's blood-stained tunic and pulled out a small leather bag hung around his neck. He upended it onto his palm, and 6 or 7 red gemstones hit his skin like hot embers.
Ouch!
He flinched, scattering the stones into the grass where they lay, glittering with a deep-set amber light. Oh, blessed divine! Murmured Vibnia and circled her heart. The priest whispered a protective verse and picked one of the rubies up.
What are they?
Leusios asked. Vibnia turned the glittering gem to inspect it. I would say these are Morvadunum fire gems. Very dangerous.
From the city of the Magi?
Vibnia wagged a finger in correction. No, it is not theirs. Although it does have the largest Lycaeum Arcanum and the most pagodas of any city, she conceded. The fire gems were invented there. There is enough destructive power here to breach a fortress.
Or collapse several mines,
Leusios thought out loud. His mind was working fast now. The attacker did not know what Sallow had carried, otherwise it would have been taken. They did not risk taking the time to search the body, letting it fall into the river. Sallow had come to destroy the Theliani mining operations. Had a spy in the Caesonii camp warned the Theliani? Had Selos or Taneos hired the assassin to do the deed? He leaned down and scooped up the firestones, wincing from the needles of pain. He dropped them back into the bag.
You had better take these, Vibnia. Remove them from harm's way.
And temptation, Leusios?
I'm not going to mess with magic I don't understand,
he retorted levelly. The priest accepted them. Dangerous tools for deadly work. I will send these to the corpus.
And I'll tell Gallen to prepare a funeral, said Leusios.
He waited for Vibnia to walk far enough away for the reeds and bushes to block her line of sight. Then he carefully recovered the firestone from under his foot. It prickled dangerously against the skin of his palm as he studied the intricate spells binding the inferno within. If he could understand it, then he could make some of his own. He slipped it into his belt pouch and looked around. He was certain another had fallen amongst the bulrushes. As he knelt to search, a black shadow fell across him. He bolted upright, fearing that Vibnia had caught him in the act.
Can I have an eye?
Oh, it's you.
Horth cocked his head and hopped closer to the corpse.
It's the most succulent part.
You're disgusting.
The raven came and went as he chose, and Leusios had grown comfortable with his presence. It was good having a friend who nobody else could talk to and spill his secrets.
It's meat,
the raven argued.
You humans waste your dead by putting them in the ground or burning them.
No. Leusios made his way back to the path. He would look for the missing gem later. He headed for the cemetery while Horth took to the air and circled overhead.
Are you going to the corpse, man?
Yes, he answered brusquely, and I think he would not be impressed if I was handed out morsels to beggar ravens.
He agrees with me that corpses have value.
The raven was in a mischievous mood, so Leusios felt entitled to unleash some sarcasm.
Maybe he's but eaten our dead. That would explain why he's content with such a meager food ration.
Obviously not. You humans get so squeamish about such things. He gets money for them.
Leusios had wasted a great deal of time trying to explain human society to the raven. Between Horth's love of half-truths and his peculiar perspective, such efforts were futile and just served to amuse the raven.
People pay a funeral tithe. It's tradition.
Oh, I do like it when traditions get reinvented.
He ignored the raven and trudged up the path to the cemetery, winding through the graves to Galen's small stone cottage along the cliff. He spotted the spindly priest weeding the owl's grave and called to him. Galen had been tall once, but he stooped more and more as the years took their toll. The young and adventurous storyteller Leusios remembered from his childhood had shriveled to a husk. He wore a plain gray cloak over clothes a farm laborer might wear. Tigonus, great spirit of mystery and the untrodden path, had little interest in outward appearances.
Master Miller!
The priest acknowledged him with a soft wheeze.
By your countenance, I assume this is not a casual visit.
Leusios nodded.
Yes, Ulfarsi. We just pulled a body out of the river. I'll give you a hand bringing him back here.
Galen nodded, accepting the news as if he had just been told to expect rain.
I'll get my handcart.
They lifted the man together, struggling with his weight.
Solid muscle, this one,
remarked Galen, as one might appreciate a piece of quality meat. The priest paused to take several breaths after they had wrestled the corpse onto the handcart. The cemetery chapel had been the work of the whole community. Blackstone had decided that they needed a place to lay the dead out and give the last rites. It also sheltered several simple graven slabs in memory of those who had no bodies for burial, for missing hunters, for miners lost under cave-ins, and for Kerne. The Half-Orc's memorial was in a corner. Leusios avoided looking in that direction. They dragged the dripping body onto the stone slab that served as a bier. Normally, family and friends would have decorated it, but for this man, it would remain bare. Galen got to work, removing the dead man's clothes with a delicate reverence.
Old enough to have scars, and yet still young enough to be well built. Durian. A pyre, then?
We think so, Leusios agreed. I'll go back to town and send Rehan and Fathwell back with wood.
Thank you, Leusios. I'll keep the ashes in the chapel in case a relative comes by to collect them.
Elayna wobbled between a scream of anger and a flood of tears. She had seen the killer. The waking dream had felt real, and yet the man's face had only been a smear of light. She wanted to break something. She stared around at Leusios' home. It was full of beautiful, breakable things.
Elayna,
Leanne, the housekeeper, entered the room tentatively.
Can I get you anything?
She stared at the housekeeper. Elayna liked her and was not going to vent her fury on an innocent. She gathered herself together with a shuddering breath.
I'm sorry, Leanne. How's Hanley and your daughter?
Leanne smiled, reassured.
She's walking, and Hanley's had to barricade the smithy. Nettle tea? I would like that.
Elayna smiled.
Can I ask what's wrong?
Leanne asked, concerned.
Oh, I just had a shock.
She realized just how tired she felt and sank onto a chair. It creaked under her pregnant weight.
Thanks,
she muttered sourly to the frame. Leanne returned with the tea.
There's something I need to tell you,
Elayna admitted. Leanne took the news about the body calmly, and they were still discussing the dead man when Vibnia came by.
Is it?
She asked immediately. Vibnia gave her a curt nod.
Leanne, leave us,
Elayna said, giving her a smile to soften the curtness of the dismissal. The housekeeper scurried out. Vibnia waited until the kitchen door had closed. "Same method, same blade," she said, and then drew a long breath. "Hal's killer is still in Blackstone." She and the priest held each other's gaze. 7 names. Vibnia preempted her question. "Of the 7, only 4 were in Blackstone yesterday. Motarius, Tolito, Ledlos, and Toneas." The priest leaned forward and gripped her hand for emphasis. "Stay clear from all of them. Let me find out their precise movements yesterday. Do nothing." Leusios swore as he dug around the roots of the bulrushes for the missing fire gem. Smoke was rising from the cemetery. Galen must have lit the pyre, he thought. Horth landed on a sapling on the riverbank. It bowed under his weight.
"I think you should take another look."
Leusios made an angry gesture at the mud-churned water.
"What do you think I'm doing?"
"No, I mean at the body."
The flames of the pyre were visible from the river. Leusios shuddered. He had seen his stepmother burn.
"No! Make yourself useful and help."
"I'll look for your fire gem if you look in the chapel."
Leusios scowled and met the eyes of the raven. Horth had an uncharacteristically determined look about him.
"Scorch it. Very well. See if you have more luck."
He stomped over to the cemetery chapel. It was quiet when he arrived, except for the crackle of flames. A glance located Galen shuffling about his small stone cottage against the cliff. Leusios went straight to the chapel, wondering why he was even indulging the bird. He strolled in through the archway and came face to face with a dead man. He yelped and recoiled, banging the back of his head on the stone archway. Sallow stood dead still, wearing only his loincloth and staring into the middle distance. He had been freshly marked with several ink sigils.
"I thought you were dead."
Lucius's sentence trailed off. The man was still deathly pale, and his powerful chest was completely without breath.
"Of course he is."
Horth's observations rang with amusement. Leusios had to be sure. He reached out and touched the man's chest. Sallow was as cold as the grave.
"Oh, and Leusios."
"What?"
"Behind you."
Bony fingers gripped the back of his neck.
"San Juan."
A flinch flashed through his mind, but failed to manifest into a jerk of surprise. In fact, he did not move a single muscle. He wanted to twist and see who had grabbed him, but neither limb nor torso responded. Only then did the full horror strike him. He was locked in paralysis. Panic blotted out rational thought. He would have screamed had he been able to. Instead, his lungs barely managed a shallow pant, just enough to keep him alive.
"Unfortunate,"
murmured Galen as he eased through the gap between him and the chapel's archway. He strained to move his eyes to see the old man, but not a single muscle obeyed him.
I was careless to leave him standing up."
The priest turned to face Leusios.
32. Strangle him."
Sallow raised his powerful hands and gripped Leusios's throat with crushing force. Even the hammering of his heart failed to stir his limbs to his defense. His disbelief was overwhelming. He couldn't die like this. Darkness clouded his vision.
"Horth!"
He screamed in his mind, but the raven was silent. The last thing he would see would be the corpse's blank expression devoid of effort and emotion.
"And release him,"
said Galen. He wanted to scream. He wanted to gulp air. He wanted to clutch at the bruises on his throat. Instead, all he could do was whimper silently inside the prison his body had become. Galen moved into the space in front of Leusios. His voice changed, shedding the decrepit, wheezing priest, and became cultured and urbane.
"Understand that I could kill you now, but I choose to let you live, boy. You are still a boy, remember."
The old man's sneer bore the weight of immense age.
You are still the boy Galen told stories to around the inn fire. You may take pride in the clever words you use on this council, and how you fire people up with your youthful spirit. But you are a babe to true power. Still, you have potential. The priest nodded to himself. Great potential. Galen smiled through mist-matched teeth. You could learn much from me, and I may have need of you. For an emperor is a king of kings, is he not? Your ambition suits my purpose. We will talk later, but not until you have contemplated your mortality. Galen looked at Sallow. 32. Put him in the corner.
With the shock of his near strangulation past, Leusios now felt burning humiliation. Sallow, still stinking of river and death, manhandled his paralyzed form into a corner of the chapel. By cruel mischance, Sallow shoved him against the wall with Kerne's plaque only a hand's breadth in front of his nose. The carved name filled his vision in damning judgment. Contemplate my mortality. Leusios felt a tiny movement as a tear seeped out of his eye. Then Galen threw a corpse shroud over him, and the world turned a dirty white. Elayna watched Ledlos and Henley discuss a horseshoe, and then head to the forge together. Only when the horse master had gone did she approach the stable yard. 3 hands were at work, and one Elayna knew as Heitha, a sturdy and reliable girl.
Heitha, can I see the horse that came in yesterday? Of course, Mistress Farmer.
The girl led her to a stall, holding a brown mare with a look of muddy exhaustion.
She's been ridden hard, mistress. We're going to groom her when we're done with the others.
Elayna stroked the chestnut nose.
Where are the saddlebags?
Heitha pointed.
We left them there, and we're wondering why he didn't come back.
Elayna rummaged through the dead man's equipment, but was disappointed.
Just supplies and prospecting gear.
She wasn't sure she knew what she was looking for.
Heitha, did anyone touch these?
The girl shook her head.
Can't say. Wethram was the only hand here when the stranger came in. You'd better talk to him, but he's home right now. Could you tell him to visit me tomorrow?
Elayna said, and headed back into town. She almost jumped when Anya called her name.
Good to see you out,
said the midwife with concern.
I heard about your shock. Does everyone know?
Elayna asked.
Leusios asked Fafnir to get the wood for the pyre. So, yes,
Anya confided with a wry smile.
He gossiped to everyone.
The midwife trailed off as she caught sight of a Durian Dakari marching in step with a supply shipment, her eyes fixed on the officer, and a slight smile played on her lips. It was Teneos. Elayna watched the young noble march past, his stoic face betrayed by how his eyes reached out to Anya, and a similar slight smile played on his lips. Elayna grinned.
Your secret isn't going to stay that way. One day you'll have to tell me everything about Teneos the lover,
she teased. Then the smile melted from her face. What if Teneos was the assassin, and he had not been looking at Anya, but at her? His smile suddenly felt very sinister. Leusios was alone. Gradually the light through the dirty shroud faded. Twilight. Time passed with agonizing slowness when all he could think about was the hopelessness of his predicament. He had been bested. For all he had learned, Galen had caught him unawares and struck first with his paralyzing magic. Was he to become an enslaved body like Sallow? Lucius thought of the Maja, no better than an animated corpse herself. But I didn't kill her, he retorted weakly back at his conscience. All the while, he had no choice but to stare at Kerne's plaque, feeling its accusatory gaze. It was humiliating. He couldn't die like this.
You can't die like what exactly?
The question popped into his mind, uninvited, with a twinkle of coy innocence.
"Horth, you should have given me that eye," the raven teased him.
"Horth, can you help me?"
"I was wondering how long until you thought of asking me for help. Eventually, I got bored, so here I am."
"I did ask you for help."
"Oh, yes, true, but that was in front of a powerful necromagus. I wasn't going to make myself obvious to him, now was I?"
"Coward! So can you help?"
"No, don't be foolish. I can't carry you away. I can't dispel the magic, and sadly, people in Blackstone don't talk to ravens. I was just curious whether you would ever ask or not."
Leusios fumed within the confines of his skull. Finally, he broke the maddening silence.
"What did he do to me?"
"Who, the necromagus?"
"Yes, whatever that is."
"I've been trying to warn you about the corpse man, but you're just not a good listener, Lucius Miller, and you have not been studying your books hard enough. A necromagus seeks to summon demonic spirits to cross over and inhabit the bodies of the dead. They believe that by studying such perverse spirits that they can extend their own life."
Lucius felt a sense of doom settle over him heavier than the gravecloth. A kernel of an idea formed from what Horth had just said, inhabiting the bodies of others.
"Oh no, don't even think about it,"
Horth warned him. He remembered his studies of the dark runes in the pit of the cabin, runes that connected souls, runes that allowed possession.
"Horth, I need your eyes."
"Both of them? When you would not even give me one as a morsel?"
"Your sight. I need to get out of this body and see through your eyes."
The raven haggled, but grudgingly agreed to Lucius's plan. From what he had learned from the Magia, direction of power was difficult without words or gestures. Fortunately, merging senses with the raven just needed careful concentration. After several attempts, he finally managed to slip out of his body and into Horth's mind. He could still feel the grit of the floor and weight of the shroud, but he saw a world full of twilight sky as the raven took to the air. After being trapped in the stiffness of his body, it was both shocking and liberating. Then vertigo hit.
"Stop yelling!"
Horth snapped irritably.
"Sorry."
Lucius calmed himself.
"Is Gowan still here?"
"No, he left with his new friend. That was why I thought it was safe to talk to you,"
the raven admitted, and wheeled towards Blackstone.
"Coward,"
grumbled Leusios. They saw two figures walking up the road to Traxian's gate. Galen had disguised the walking corpse under a hooded cloak. A little further up, Lakeland, the overseer of Gavain's newest mine, was waiting with a cart.
"I got your message,"
he said gruffly. He was a Keat who had drifted in from the wilderness. Kendlewick's gossip was that he had been abandoned. Galen extended a hand.
"The money?"
Lakeland dropped a bag of coins into it with distaste.
"So, what is this one called?"
"I presume you can count,"
the priest wheezed.
"What comes after 31?
The overseer scowled. Galen ordered Sallow into the cart as he secreted the bag of coins in his shabby robes.
"Lakeland has seen walking corpses before,"
Lucius observed.
"I told you plainly, didn't I? The corpse man gets coins for the bodies."
There was no mistaking the self-satisfaction in Horth's tone. Lucius let the raven gloat, instead trying to listen to the conversation.
"Strong one."
Lakeland nodded with approval, although his tone had an edge of revulsion.
"Still fresh,"
chuckled the necromagus, enjoying the overseer's discomfort as Lakeland urged the ox and cart up towards Traxian's gate.
"That's why Gavain's newest mine makes so much money,"
Lucius realized.
"Elayna was right again. He's using the dead to dig the gold out. You should follow him to check I'm right."
"But I want to see what the necromagus does to your body, complained Horth.
That was a good point, thought Leusios. What's he going to do to me?
How should I know?
I was thinking to myself, Leusios retorted.
Well, it's a bit crowded in here. How am I meant to tell the difference?
Horth landed on the chapel roof with plenty of time to watch the necromagus approach along the river path. Galen reached inside his robe and absently tossed the bag of coins away. There was a plop. Did he just throw away the gold? You were wrong, Leusios couldn't resist pointing out. He wasn't selling them for money.
I saw an exchange of goods for currency. I'm only a dumb bird, but doesn't that constitute selling?
But he clearly doesn't want the money. He just wanted Lackland to think the money was important, argued Leusios.
So?
Asked Horth. So, Galen has another priority, Leusios explained. Either he wants Lackland to be successful,
and Gawain,
Horth interrupted pedantically.
What? Either he wants Lackland and Gawain to be successful. Please, go on.
The air of fussy innocence around the Raven was infuriating, but he had a point. What if Gawain knew? He set the thought aside and completed his original line of reasoning. Or, Lackland is taking these walking dead to a place where Galen wants them to be. 32 dead folk working near to the Blackstone. That thought gave Leusios a creeping sense of dread. Horth made what felt like a mental shrug.
You could ask him. He's coming up the path.
Galen stopped and glanced towards the chapel and muttered under his breath.
Leusios can wait.
Oh,
sighed Horth in mock regret.
I guess you aren't that important after all.
Shut up! The necromagus continued up to the door of his cottage, produced a large unwieldy key, and pushed it into the lock.
Keys are a fascinating rarity,
Horth began in a thoughtful manner.
Do you find it ironic that priests of Teganus, as keepers of secrets, are famous locksmiths but never have anything worth stealing?
He's having a little trouble, Leusios said distractedly, preoccupied by what Galen might be hiding.
I think there's something stuck in the lock, said the Raven, oozing false innocence.
What have you done? Leusios asked suspiciously.
Remember that pretty glowing stone you lost? Horth said. I found it.
Galen swore in a very unpriestly manner and seized the key with both hands.
And I just remembered where I put it.
You didn't, gasped Leusios. Galen gave a grunt of effort and forced the key to move the locking bar. There was a crunch. The door exploded. The cloak that had hung so slack on Galen's spindly frame billowed for an instant as it filled with flame. Then the fabric burst into shreds, and the necromagus was consumed. The fireball tore through the cottage roof, bursting through every shutter, and flung the priest's flaming corpse halfway across the cemetery.
Oh, dear!
The rest of Horth's droll comment was lost to Leusios, as his senses were rudely slapped back into his body. That's the end of Chapter 24. Next time, Leusios seeks counsel from Kulain and investigates the mine with an unlikely ally. Chris has really appreciated all the thoughts and feedback, so he set up a website at christomkins.co.uk to share more about the world, like maps, and answer any of your questions. That's Chris, TOMKINS.co.uk. Your enthusiasm fuels this series, so if this chapter drew you in, consider sharing with your friends and family. See you next week for more of Blackstone.